So yeah, I'm a researcher at Singularity University, so I get to think about how data is impacting the world and how algorithms are transforming what it means to be human. So today, we're going to talk about your data in an algorithmic age. This is a headline from June of this year. US requiring social media information from visa applicants. Now, this is deeply personal because I'm from Vancouver on a work visa, and I arrived a few months before that. Makes you kind of wonder about that whole freedom of speech thing, you know, we've fought so deeply for. I'd love you to guess where this quote is from. When an individual applies for a loan, the lender examines the credit ratings of members of the individual's social network who are connected to the individual. If the average credit rating of these members is at least a minimum credit score, the lender continues to process the loan application. Otherwise, the loan application is rejected. So this is from a 2015 Facebook patent that was approved. And as much as I think Facebook realized that getting in the credit rating business is probably not good for brand trust, using your social information is something that already is used to essentially do price discrimination. So in the UK, there was an insurance company called Admiral. They noticed that if you use words like always or never, you're probably a little bit more aggressive of a driver, for example. And just earlier this year, the New York State released new rules regarding how insurance companies can use your social media information. And so what I want to talk about is how the personal has entered the market. And this is more important than ever because there is a growing asymmetry of power between those that can collect your data and use it. And if we don't get this right and don't align our data with our best interest, that is a very dark future. Let's take something kind of everyday that we all do, like using your Visa or a MasterCard. You go to a store, you use it. Well, it turns out that this information actually goes into a large data network. One of those data brokers is called Axiom. This is a screenshot of the developer's site. And as you can read, you can put the user's name in there, and then it says how many credit cards there are. Here are a few more screenshots. One second. Oh yeah, are you a heavy credit card user? How many lines of credit do you have? Do you have a heavy credit card balance? And so all of this type of information is being collected. So it's not just, you know, your website visits or your behaviors on your phone. It's many things, and all this data is being captured. So this is just a summary, and you don't need to read everything, but Axiom and Oracle, so these are two of the major data brokers. And so as they're collecting all this data, as you can see, you get a pretty intimate sense of someone's self, their personality, their propensities. And all of this information is being bought and sold. I'd like to kind of emphasize, so for example, with Oracle, they have over 2 billion people in their database with over 30,000 data attributes on each individual. So this is mostly bought and sold for targeted advertising. It also goes to, of course, Facebook. Facebook has over 2 billion users. They have, I think, about, at least in 2017, at the time of this study, 52,000 data points on each individual. And as we know, as you collect more and more information, you can start to see that we don't only have these physical selves here, we have these digital versions of ourselves floating. And they might not be perfect, but they're pretty good at least doing some predictions on you. And the most famous prediction market is, of course, advertising. So at Singularity University, we often talk about exponential trends. So I was interested to find out that when you actually add the Facebook and Google revenue, you see a nice exponential trend happening. So again, this isn't your data explicitly being sold, it is your profile being sold on an auction advertising market. And so, as you can see, our individual data is very valuable, and both Google and Facebook are, you know, at the top. I think now Facebook just went to number 6, but was number 5 for most of the time. But they're some of the biggest tech companies in the world, and you know, their business models are based on essentially selling our information. And again, I think we've all been quite used to this concept of getting a service, doing a Google in exchange for seeing advertisements, but it gets a little darker when it goes beyond just selling items and selling ideologies. Oh, and yeah, this is a great author, and I think this summarizes this whole concept quite well. We live in a giant advertising panopticon, which has serious ramifications for potential manipulation, endless distraction, and the slow diminishing of free choice and autonomy. So again, even if you're not clicking these ads, what about your time? How much time and how are they keeping you on these platforms? So our information is going beyond just targeting us with information. It's starting to impact major aspects of our life. If you are, for example, a fresh grad that wants to work at Goldman Sachs, or maybe the Hilton or Unilever, chances are when you go in for your first interview, it's actually going to be with a camera. So HireVue is a company. They provide software that instead of a regular old-fashioned interview, now it's a 30-minute video interview, half dozen questions, and at the end it splits out an employability score. The critics say it's pseudoscience, it's a license to discriminate, and the people whose lives and opportunities are literally being shaped by these systems don't have any chance to weigh in. On the other end, this is the HR head at Unilever. The system had also helped steer managers away from hiring only mini-me's, who look and act just like them, boosting the company's diversity hires. Now, this is a pretty deep kind of concept, but the reality is that there's only going to be more and more of these type of technologies in our world. There's going to be only more and more of these automated decision-making systems. And so this is something we all need to get used to. And again, there's this shift happening from our data being used to target us, but now our data or the data of other people have been trained to these systems that now impact our experience in the world. But let's go just a little bit darker. This is a study from 2016, as you can read, automated inference on criminality using faced image. So this is a study from 2 Chinese researchers. They looked at a homogeneous sample size of Chinese men that are male, but they fed it about 1,800 images, trained the algorithm, and turned out that they could actually predict to 90% accuracy if someone was a criminal. Again, this has nothing to do with who you are or where you've been. This only has to do with what you look like. And so to explain how this algorithm figured out this correlation, you see some images here, but we find some discriminating features for predicting criminality, such as lip curvature, eye inner corner distance, and the so-called nose-mouth angle. The variation among criminal faces is significantly greater than that of non-criminal faces. So again, if you are someone that looks different than average, according to this data set, you're more likely to be a criminal. And we know that this type of technology is being deployed. Or let's just say you're at work. Chances are maybe you're using a computer that your work provided. Well, another study found that actually by just looking at your keyboard patterns, so specifically the weighting of your fingers, they can actually detect early onset neurodegenerative diseases like Parkinson's. Again, this is actually pretty remarkable to actually take note of this before you or your doctor might even notice. But of course, the question here is, who's collecting this data and what are they doing with it? So humans have always used data to make decisions, but I really feel like we're shifting now into this world where we have to ask ourselves, well, what does the algorithm think of me? And another way to think about this is that we are increasingly becoming machine readable as we have all these technologies that are constantly collecting our data. But beyond making decisions about us, our data is actually shifting once again. This is a startup called Ever. Their promise is to make memories, and what they do is they offer free storage of your photos forever. So it's very popular among millennials. They've had over 14 billion photos uploaded. But the question, of course, is, well, how do they make money on this? Well, so they created another website, and turns out that they developed an incredibly powerful facial recognition algorithm. And what's impressive about this is that they actually beat both Microsoft and Amazon in industry testing. But not only do they target industry, they also target the government. And what we're going to see with a lot of these tech companies, especially the giants, is as they're expanding their markets, the government is just that easy next one that has deep, deep pockets. So after users took note of this, these are just some of the reactions of quietly, ever has been training a facial recognition algorithm that could be used by surveillance technology. So of course, what does the company do? You just rebrand, right? And data and privacy and surveillance are tightly knit. And so just as to the last example, we were talking about how your photos are training facial recognition algorithms. At the same time, if you're someone that, for example, uses an Amazon Alexa, your voice is training another algorithm that could be used in lots of different ways. And so I think it's important to start actually seeing ourselves as not just information about us, but actually as inputs to these algorithms that are growing all around us. This, on the other hand, is anyone here have a Ring doorbell? Okay, yeah, so this is a map of the network, the Neighbor app it's called, and it's where all the police have partnered with this Amazon Ring doorbell, so they know where the doorbells are. Now, police still need a warrant in order to access that footage, but of course many people don't know that. But this just kind of paints this picture as to how much closer basically big tech and police and government are working together. Now, everything doesn't have to be dark about surveillance technology. So this is some video footage that my car captured. And as you can see, there's two friends here, and one just is not feeling good. It's pretty late at night. But you know what? They figured out some high fives can kind of perk the energy up there. That's right. And just in case you need it, one more time. And so this warms my heart and is a great reminder of we just sometimes need friends that can give us high fives. But that aside, this points to this obvious notion of, oh, now all these smart connected cars are actually surveillance machines. And this one in particular has 8 video cameras rolling. And again, going back to this concept of humans being this input for AI, as per Elon Musk, every time the customer drives the car, they're training the system to be better. And don't get me wrong, this is incredible technology. I mean, right now, with a Tesla, you get updates. Well, all of a sudden, your car performs better. And this is remarkable. But I think with all these technologies, what happens is that this is code, right? And you really just need a handful of people that are tweaking this code. And when we aren't needed anymore as inputs, my question is, well, how are these profits really redistributed in society? And it's obviously not just Tesla. This is for all type of AI and all of this infrastructure that is now privatized, but really is something that everyone uses and would traditionally be considered more of a social good. What's at stake here? There's a lot, but at the core, it's freedom. It's privacy, it's agency, it's ability to think for yourself, develop, your point of view, your future. And I think that it's been really easy to trade these rights that we have for convenience, and I don't blame us for it. But I think we need to take a step back and think about what these rights actually represent and whether or not these technologies are actually aligned with them. So a doctor has a duty of care, and a lawyer as well has a duty to act in your best interest. But there is this asymmetry of power, and the reality is the fiduciary duty is to shareholders. And so I think this is a really important tension that we need to remember when for some reason, it seems totally natural to give all these private companies or these big corporations the most intimate information about our deepest selves. Now, there have been movements to kind of counter this. So a governor has proposed a new data dividend. One of the presidential candidates is using data as a property right as one of their messages for their platforms. And then Jaron Lanier, he's a futurist that's been talking about really monetizing data. And well, this data is really valuable. Why don't we monetize it? But I think we have to be very, very careful about that type of thinking, because essentially we're saying, okay, well, it's okay if we get paid for it. It's okay to put this inner self into this economic logic. And is that what we want to do with something that's so deeply personal? Do we want to just put it into kind of this capitalistic framework? And so I have one long quote, but I'm up here, so we get to read it. Industrial capitalism transformed nature's raw materials into commodities, and surveillance capitalism lays its claims to the stuff of human nature for a new commodity invention. Now, it is human nature that is scraped, torn, and taken from another century's market project. It is obscene to suppose that this harm can be reduced to the obvious fact that users receive no fee for the raw material of their supply. That critique is a feat of misdirection that would use a pricing mechanism to institutionalize and therefore legitimate the extraction of human behavior for manufacturing and sale. It ignores the key point that the essence of the exploitation here is the rendering of our lives as behavioral data for the sake of others' improved control over us. And if you want to learn more about that, I recommend reading The Age of Surveillance Capitalism, or at least watching the interviews with Shoshana Zuboff. So kind of that's on the personal level. Again, if there's a lot of this, when you start seeing it related to kind of our agency and our ability for self-determination. But on a social level, for me, this is probably one of the darkest realities of our time. And this is just stats for the US, but essentially what you see happening is that, especially in the last 20 years, once technology has really kind of risen to its to its market presence, there's been a huge gap between essentially labor productivity and wages. So to be specific, all this new technology has been driving up productivity, but it is not being distributed among people equally. And so we have this growing concentration of power and wealth. And the reason this is so important is that as this gap grows, we're only going to have less social cohesion. And when that happens, people will be looking up to the government, but if they don't necessarily have the money to bring order, you'll only see a movement to more type of authoritarian regimes. Or at the least, the world will be more and more controlled by a handful of people and their ideas, values, and biases. So yeah, is technology in its current form a force of control or liberation? Thank you.